welcome back, everyone. It's 11 o'clock. Just before we get started on our keynote, Jim, you have an announcement?
Yeah, thank you. So we have a gift card drawing today. We're going to be doing at the end of the meeting that was hosted by the Spectrum firm. So if you guys check your chat screens, there will be a link there. And so anybody in the meeting can go follow that link, enter their name, contact information. And at the end, we'll be doing a drawing like we've been trying to do every month online. So right now we have that. Again, that's from the Spectrum firm this month. They were gracious enough to host that up for us. So everyone's invited to attend and attempt to win that.
All right, thank you, Jim, and thank you to the Spectrum firm for that. Okay, Nathan and Greg, the floor is yours.
Okay, well, hey, thank you very much. I appreciate you, NAPCO, giving us this opportunity to speak out to all of our first responders out there and to our frequency license holders. This discussion really pertains to them and how best they can help serve the first responders out there by being an active part in determining how their frequencies are used and making sure that the frequencies are used properly per the FCC rules and regulations. So I want to start this off just by introducing myself. I'm Nathaniel Hinkle. I'm the telecommunications systems supervisor for the County of Sacramento. I've been here about 11 years now. I started out as a field technician and worked on up through the ranks. Prior to that, I worked for the state of California for 3 years as a telecommunications technician there in Area 6, which is in the foothills. I did a lot of work with CHP and California CDF and became a COMT with them for a couple of years there. So I did respond as a COMT on several fires. That was a great experience of mine. I really had a lot of fun. It was a lot of hard work, but it was a lot of fun, and it was a great learning experience for me to work directly with CDF. Since I do live in a wildland fire area, it was really great to connect with those folks and see how well they function and what they do. I'm a third generation amateur radio operator, and I took my hobby and I've made it my personal profession because I have such a love and an interest in communications and electronics. It became kind of a natural decision for me. Anyway, that's my short introduction. I'll start the video here soon, but I did want to turn it over to Greg Glenn. Greg's been a lot of help to me in pursuing this endeavor this last year or so. And, he really opened my eyes to a lot of things that needed to be done as a frequency license holder or representative for that agency. Go ahead there, Greg.
Yeah, good morning. Do I have audio? It looks like
you
I do. My name is Greg Glenn, and I'm with Pulse Signal Solutions. And a little bit about myself, I did kind of the same thing Nate did for many, many years. I made my hobby my profession. I've been working with interference hunting and in building signal solutions, as well as I was a commercial licensee operating over 800 meg channels across 90 sites on the commercial side. So I've been dealing with in building signal solutions since basically they started back in the 80s. And one of the things that I did was I left the engineering side and went over to manufacturing, where I still functioned as an engineer, but kind of lost track of what was happening in the industry. I did a lot of in-building work and RF design work prior to going into manufacturing. And, we always worked directly with the licensee, and that kind of changed over time. So one of the things we're trying to do with this effort is to help re-engage the licensees in this, as well as bring the industry back into some sort of symbiosis with the FCC rules. So I'll turn it back over to Nate. Nate, go ahead and take it away.
Okay, well, thank you. Let's go ahead and start this presentation. I'm hoping that everybody can see the introduction screen that I have here. And basically the title of our presentation today is Help, I've Fallen and I Can't Get Radio Comms. and call someone who cares. That's your FCC license holder. You know, as an FCC license holder, I really deeply care about your ability to communicate as a first responder. And I'm not just talking about police and fire. I'm talking about the dispatchers that are often overlooked as first responders out there. And you know, if you can't talk to your first responders, then you know, we have a real issue. And so I want to go through and show a clip here. This is a recent clip that East Bay Times put in. You know, this is really very suggestive of, you know, what our police officers face on a daily basis.
Fremont police released video of a deadly gunfight between an officer and a suspect on Highway 84 back in March. The incident began when a vehicle that was reported stolen set off a license plate reader, and an officer was sent to investigate. The officer tried to stop the suspect, but he sped away, hitting other cars while fleeing, according to police. Ultimately, the vehicle became disabled and stopped. The man, Joshua Gloria, is seen on the video shooting at the officer, who took cover and returned fire. Gloria was struck and later died.
Northbound onward towards 84. Traffic is moderate. Number 3 lane moderate traffic. Oh, you just CC'd on the other ramp. Is maybe continuing.
The video is graphic. Viewer discretion is advised.
People 40 eastbound, number 2. He's got a left rear flat. Eastbound, number 2 lane. Just notify CHP. Hey, Forrest, I'm coming up 84. Where you at? We're eastbound 84. Still on the ramp. He's going to be on the right-hand shoulder. Copy, I'm coming off right now. He's yielding. Vehicle yielding. Shots fired! Shots fired! Shots fired! Shots fired! 1199. Shots fired. Suspect down. Suspect down. Peter, you hit? Negative.
That's a very dramatic video of some of the things that our officers face every day. And that's, this, you know, doesn't discount what all the firefighters do. You know, I've been on several fires, and I know exactly what they go through, and I've had a lot of experience with this also. So I have great respect for our first responders. And these kind of videos really just drive home for me how critical communications are, and how important the license holder is in this, in making sure that, you know, our first responders can get communications. Anyway, a brief history on SRRCS, the organization I work for. You know, Sacramento County is located in a portion of California in between the Sierra Mountain Range and the Pacific Coast. It is where the state capital of California resides, in the city of Sacramento. We're centrally located in the breadbasket of California, and our county encompasses 1,000 square miles of varied terrain. So we're not all flat here in the bowl, but we got a lot of edges we have to cover, especially in our Folsom area. And it does rise up fairly quickly. So it does provide some challenges to communications. We live in one of the most agriculturally productive states in the union, and have a wide variety of technology-based and governmental-based economies in this area. We serve a population of approximately 1.7 million people regionally. The county of Sacramento and the city of Sacramento are the FCC license holders for the SRRCS system. We work closely together to ensure compliance with the rules and regulations as set forth by the FCC to provide one of the region's largest public safety communication systems. Our system is comprised of 700 and 800 megahertz, 30 channel phase 1 FDMA P25 simulcast cell. Our Davis P25 8-channel, 2-site simulcast cell, and 2 P25 ARS sites, one down in the Delta region known as our Twitchell Island site, and one is a Folsom ARS site to cover a smaller area or swath in the Folsom area, Sutter Street. We're supported through our subscriber fees and provide a public safety grade communication system for our first responders and many other agencies. We currently have over 18,000 subscribers from city, county, state, and federal agencies that encompass first responders down to some of the local school districts and water resources. Some of our agencies currently on the system: Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, California Department of Corrections, City of Davis, City of Sacramento, Police, Fire, and other departments, our airports, American Medical Response, California Department of Justice, California Governor's Office of Emergency Services, California Highway Patrol, California State Parks, Sacramento Regional Fire, ICE, United States Customs, Veterans Affairs, Yolo County. We have quite a few different departments that depend on the radio system working well every day. And I have a team of great people that I work with as technicians to make sure that this goes smoothly 99% of the time. I won't say 100%, because then I would work myself out of a job that it'd be too good. Things do break. Anyway, why should the FCC license holder be your first point of contact when you discover that you don't have public safety radio coverage in your area? Why is it that it is required by the FCC that the license holder be involved? Every day around this great nation of ours, public safety first responders use radios and cell phones to provide the critical life-saving communications they need and depend on. Oftentimes, this involves anything from assisting individuals that are in trouble due to circumstances beyond their control, or to offer life-saving medical attention, deal with fires, traffic stops, and shootings. These critical communication services are regulated by the Federal Communications Commission, and they oversee the proper utilization of these limited natural resources. And you might say, well, that's what do you mean limited natural resources? I'll go into more detail about the radio spectrum here in a minute. It's important to note that all of the usable radio spectrum is licensed for the use by the FCC to the frequency license holders. APCO plays an important part in helping the FCC determine how these licenses will be allocated and used. NAPCO members do this regularly at our monthly meetings for our area particularly. They play a really big part in making sure that frequencies are reused properly, that we're not going to interfere with one another. APCO plays a really critical role in this NAPCO. So when I say that, the frequency spectrum is a limited resource, basically the FCC is the overseeing regulator for the limited supply of radio spectrum and how it is allocated to the license holders. It's very similar to a faucet, basically, in a water flow. The FCC controls the faucet as on and off, and the flow is a consistent and predictable thing that we deal with physically, and it's called the radio spectrum and the optical spectrum. Most of our use that you see here throughout the years has been in the HF, VHF, UHF, and now we're really dealing with a lot of super high frequencies. So everything from your microwave connectivity on down to your portable radios really, for the most part, functions in these frequency ranges in this part of the radio spectrum. And this is where the FCC does its best to divide this up. But in recent years, we've been seeing more and more allocations for communications that the FCC has been responsible for. As technology advances, and again, this has only happened in about the last 100 years. My grandfather, my father, and myself have seen the changes come forward that have been almost like a wave coming across, a tsunami hitting a beach, I guess is the best way to describe it. The technology advances at such a quick pace that, the FCC does its best to keep up with it. Again, they regulate all forms of communications, everything from TV to radio, on through the spectrum of things. As a representative for the Sacramento County FCC license holder, I care about the needs of all our first responders. The licensee must be directly involved and consulted with all issues related to radio coverage, outdoors and indoors. The FCC requires this of us directly. Unfortunately, there has been a trend in the industry with the in-building radio coverage to push some of this responsibility onto our fire marshals, or the AHJ, through the National Fire Protection Act, NFPA, and the International Fire Codes. It is critical that the license holder be directly involved in making decisions about the use of the frequencies under the control of the licensee. You wouldn't ask me as a radio technician / engineer to go fight a fire, yet the legislation as written by the NFP and IFC is asking fire marshals to make decisions about the use of our licensed frequencies, and they don't fully understand how this can negatively impact the communication systems. And by that, I mean, it literally can take the communication systems down with a couple of wrong decisions. The legislation needs to include the license holder as the first point of contact. When we receive a complaint about poor radio coverage in our area, we respond very quickly and with due diligence to address the issue. We cannot, however, provide 100% coverage everywhere due to the laws of physics, finances, and available resources. We do, however, use this important feedback to make plans for future coverage expansion, and as the license holder, have the designated authority to add additional radio coverage as needed. And as a recent example of this, we were recently contacted by our Folsom PD department. They were experiencing very real coverage issues in a newly designated housing area just south of the Highway 50 area in Folsom. And this is where it rises from literally valley level to 800 feet fairly quickly. And it became very difficult to cover that area. So basically what we're doing is we're gonna add a new, smaller Motorola ARS site to help the coverage issue in that area in the very near future. We also recently received a complaint that some of our officers transporting prisoners to the Yolo County Jail from West Sacramento had very poor coverage along this route. We're going to also add another small ARS site into the Yucca or Yolo County Dispatch Center to help with this request. And again, if the license holder is not involved directly with this, we can't fix these issues. And certainly, the fire marshal's intents are well-intentioned, but again, you're not going to ask me to go fight a fire. I don't have professional training, and I don't have the knowledge on how to do that properly. And this legislation needs to be changed. The frequency license holder needs to be one of the key and first people contacted when coverage issues come up both outdoors and indoors. And I do want to take the opportunity to thank our local fire department, Metro Fire, for working with me directly as the license holder to help facilitate that. I know a lot of the local fire marshals are now working directly with us to correct that. And it's really been a great experience for me moving forward on that. So with that, I'll let Greg Glenn take over with the FCC rules and regulations. So take it away, Greg.
Yeah, very good. And we did actually send out invites to some of the folks at the FCC. I don't know if we have anybody on here, but if there is a representative from the FCC and they would like to say something, please do pipe in. We're always interested.
Hi, Greg.
Yes.
Lark Hadley, Director of the Enforcement Bureau, Region 3.
Oh, hi, Lark. How are you today?
Good afternoon.
Good. Good afternoon. Everyone, this is very important. This is so important. I've worked with Greg on other cases. I just want to say I appreciate all you do. I'll be listening, and this is I can't overstress how important this is. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us, Lark.
Yeah, thank you.
We're out here trying to do some yeoman's work, all of us. Okay, so what I'm going to talk about today is a little bit about, number one, the FCC rules regarding the use of signal boosters, BDAs, or BDRs. Both the IFC and NFPA, and I sit on NFPA, and we are trying to get this changed, but they have requirements that are being enforced in such a fashion. And the reason that I use the terminology being enforced in such a fashion is there's those that will argue that the NFPA and the IFC code do not require the use of signal boosters. However, I would submit that 99% of all fire agencies trying to enforce this code are using signal boosters to mitigate communications issues. And we cannot look at a communication issue in a building any differently than we look at a communication issue out on the street. This is all has to work together, and the licensee or their engineers have to engineer solutions that are complete in the ecosystem, not, oh, I'm going to treat a building separately from the rest of the world, because you can't do that in RF. Even though the walls exist between the building and the outside, the RF doesn't always honor the walls. So we have to understand that a signal booster is nothing more than a 5-watt simulcast on-channel carrier repeater. That's what they started out back when. They've kind of changed and evolved a little bit, but at the end of the day, that's exactly what they are. And their placement is important because everyone changes the dynamic of the radio system in which they are used. Every signal booster installed changes your radio network and how it operates. Next slide, Nate. But what does the FCC rule have to say on the subject? Well, CFR 47.9219 in the United States of America is the rule that regulates the use of, frankly, well, Part 90 is all the rule section that has to do with what we call private land mobile radio, which public safety communications is part of. 90.219 is the specific rule section that has to do with the use of signal boosters in the private land mobile radio service. Go ahead and do the next slide, Nate. I've copied some verbiage directly out of the rules. We're not going to go over the technical side, but we are going to talk about the administrative side. First of all, the authority to operate. As with any Part 90 device, whether it be your two-way radio, whether it be a signal booster, whether it be the repeaters that you use in your normal operation, the PLMRS licensee for that jurisdiction or those frequency is the responsible party. The use of a signal booster is nothing different. It's a Part 90 device, and the licensee for stations operating on assigned channels higher than 150 megs may operate a signal booster limited to the service band for which they are authorized as needed anywhere within the station service contour, but may not extend the service contour. The licensee may also consent to the operation of a signal booster by a non-licensee, such as a building owner, again, within the licensee service contour and across their applicable frequencies, but they must maintain a reasonable level of control over the operation in order to alleviate interference problems. Now, I want to bring something up here because I've been asked the question, well, what's a reasonable level of control? And while I'm not an attorney, I will say this much about it. If you have a driver's license, for instance, in the state of California, you are required to maintain a reasonable level of control over your vehicle. Even though the state or the rules may allow you to drive 65 miles an hour, if you're driving 65 miles an hour in a parking lot, that would be considered not maintaining a reasonable level of control. The licensee has to do the same thing. If a licensee is going to allow signal boosters in their marketplace, they need to keep track of where they are, For instance, you put 5 signal boosters in a shopping mall in different buildings, the likelihood of having signal booster interaction is very high. So the licensee must be involved to maintain a reasonable level of control over the signal booster operation in order to resolve interference. And this is both interference to third party, but they should be not wanting to interfere with their own networks. Licensees seeking to operate signal boosters must obtain express consent of the licensee, and the consent must be maintained in a recordable form. Now, the FCC has come out in a document back in 2019, I believe, where they actually said it should be in a written format, and it needs to be maintained both by the building owner as well as the licensee, so that if there's a problem, they know where these things are located. Next slide. The enforcement of fire code is not always in symbiosis with the FCC rules. For example, the fire code doesn't say anything about a licensee's contour. Many times, especially in VHF, signal boosters are being installed outside of a licensee's contour. Shouldn't be happening, but it is. In fact, most AHJs feel, and this is how these rules are being enforced, if you step outside of a building and you have radio coverage, and then into the building and the building fails, this obligates the building owner to install a signal booster. That is how it's being enforced. Next section, please. I want to bring up one other thing. The FCC, in none of their rules, indicate that if I step outside of a building and I have radio coverage and I step inside, that I can use a signal booster. There's a whole other set of rules that have to be followed. So what we need licensees to do, and why we're speaking with ABCO and NAPCO this morning, is we're out here compelling the licensees to help us get this problem solved. Number one, licensees need to be involved in policy making. Desi brought that up this morning. I was like, wow, I should have talked to him before I did this presentation. I sit on the NFPA board. There's 52 members on NFPA 1225. There's not one member that I am a past licensee. Otherwise, there's no members that I know of that are licensees. They're actually writing policy that affects licensees directly. You need to be involved on those committees. You need to bring a voice to NFPA and IFC. Again, I can try, I'm doing the best I can, but I need help. I cannot do it myself. You need to keep track of legislation and make sure your radio systems don't end up with problems. Right now, there's a bunch of legislation going on in the state of Florida. And in fact, this morning, one Florida mayor just said, hey, you know what? We're going to eliminate the need for buildings that are under 75 foot to have enhancement systems. I'm not advocating either way for that. I mean, I don't know that that's a great idea. However, this is all a result of not doing things properly, not building out the radio systems and then using in-building enhancement applications to, they're using in-building enhancement applications rather than building out radio systems. We need to fund the proper build out of our radio networks and then look at buildings as part of the overall issue. This has to be a complete ecosystem. So we need licensees to keep track. Go back one more for me, Nate, please.
Farther back.
Do not take a neutral stance. One of the things I hear all the time is, oh, well, you know, the in-building guys know what they're doing. Well, I'm not going to argue that they do or they don't. I'm going to say some do, some don't, but it's not somebody else's issue. This is a licensee's issue. You allow a signal booster to be put on your network, you're responsible for it. Now, if you don't want to use signal boosters on your network, and some licensees have said, no, we're not going to use signal boosters. We're going to build out our network and we're going to do that. They're getting pushback from the fire departments that they don't want fire coverage. They don't want PD coverage. That's absolutely not the case. Everybody wants good coverage, but the thought process that we're going to solve this problem by putting in signal boosters is ill-advised. In fact, I was speaking with one licensee in the middle of the United States who has said that 80% of all the signal boosters installed in their jurisdiction, now that they have been looking at it, are not necessary. They don't need to be installed. And I think Nate would agree with me. We're seeing a lot of that in Sacramento County right now. Licensees need to develop a best practices. We need to get together and sit down and come up with best practices, because there's a lot of smaller agencies that don't have the ability to do what Nate does and a lot of these the larger licensees can do. Signal boosters, after all, are a 5-watt simulcast on-channel repeater. In fact, you may even hear the term bidirectional repeater used to describe them. And for any of you in the radio business, you know that you do not put 2 repeaters in buildings right next door to each other on the same frequencies without making sure that there's no interaction. Each signal booster needs to be treated as part of the network, not an outlier, because they do change the ecosystem every time they're installed. Next slide. And I think that's it. I'm hoping that we have some time for questions and answers. It looks like we do have about 10 minutes if anybody is interested.
Greg,
Yes, sir.
Lark Hadley again with the FCC. I'd like to make a couple comments if helpful. Okay, please note that the FCC rule says that it has to be expressed consent and written. It does not say implied. So what I like to see, and I like my agents to see as a supervisor, is if we're investigating a complaint and I come up on the equipment, usually the large red box somewhere near the roof or the basement, I'd like to see a manila envelope with all the information, and particularly the letter of expressed consent from the licensee. Oftentimes building management changes, they don't know. So if you go through all this, it's wonderful, it's helpful if you can put a hard copy in a robust envelope, either inside or taped to the side of the booster system. You got to remember, the licensee is the only one that has authority to operate on that frequency. And so if there's a booster, it has to have the permission expressed of the licensee.
And I think that's an important note. You know, in our county here, we have seen many BDAs installed without express written consent from us, the licensee, or the city. And, you know, we are taking corrective action now to make sure that that doesn't happen in the future. And we're setting policies and moving forward with that. And again, I've been very, very fortunate that in recent times, our local Sacramento Metro Fire representative has worked directly with me to help ensure that this doesn't happen in the future. And I'm getting calls daily from our fire marshals and other people doing testing, building contractors, checking in with us and finding out, you know, what is the policy for Sacramento County? And, you know, we have an interim policy in place right now, and we're pushing forward with that. We expect that to go to our Board of Supervisors for final approval. And yeah, we really appreciate your comments there, Lark, and appreciate your help with this issue.
Any other questions or comments?
There is a question here from Mark Schroeder in chat. It says, in Santa Clara County, we began a few years ago requiring a formal test and document process with us before a BDA system is authorized to operate. We also have created a registration number for each approved BDA system in known operation.
Excellent.
Yeah, those are really great steps in moving forward. And I know I've talked with many FCC license holders that are facing these issues around the nation. I mean, Florida, Fort Lauderdale, Washington, D.C., several places in California here, Los Angeles, you know, Las Vegas. I've talked and spoken with a number to find out what their policies are. Orange County, for example, has a great policy, one that I've emulated in our policy. And it really is important that as a representative or directly the licensee, we need to step forward and make sure that we help our fire marshals and our AHJs get what they need. But we also have to make sure that we protect the public safety radio system, both indoors and outdoors. And that's really all I'm asking for from everyone here is just be aware that anytime you have a coverage issue, come to the license holder. We really do care about your communications. And I pretty much wanted to stress that in this presentation. And I guess with any other questions at all?
There's a question, comment coming in from Richard Oldham. What are the FCC requirements for registering BDAs and type? And is there a new database introduced recently?
The FCC currently requires the registration of all Class B signal boosters. Surprisingly enough, the biggest cause of problems are currently Class A boosters. I mean, Sacramento, we probably have 70 or so Class B signal boosters, and we never run into problems with those things. The old bird, you know, SB2s. So, but yes, Class B signal boosters are currently supposed to be registered under the new rules that were written, I believe, in 2012. And there is an FCC database. I know some of the licensees are actually registering them under their own FRN so that they can keep track of them, because so many of these companies go in and out of business that they want to have a permanent record. I would recommend that a licensee keep 100% track of where any BDA that they put in goes. One of the things that we ran into recently was, again, the Home Depot, the Costco, and the Dick's Sporting Goods ending up with 3 BDAs in 3 separate buildings within 500 foot of each other. And it was actually, the addition of the 3rd BDA killed the 2nd BDA that had been in place for 6 years. And then when there was an incident, they didn't have coverage. And, you know, they all pointed to the 2nd BDA. Well, that wasn't the problem. It was actually the addition of the 3rd BDA. And this is incumbent upon the licensees to help us as engineers understand that. Because if I don't know that there's a BDA next door to me, I'm designing, and I don't manage to stumble upon it, I have no way of dealing with it. And one of the other things I would also bring up, and I don't want to get too technical here, but for instance, Sacramento County has directional transmit antennas on all of, or at least 9 out of the 10 simulcast sites. So what you see on the downlink is nothing compared to what you're going to have on uplink. So there is a very technical aspect to this that needs to be looked at. And unfortunately, the fire code is like, oh, well, if you don't have coverage, you put in a BDA. Sacramento County, the reality is that probably we're going to need more downlink help than we do uplink. We have better uplink. And it's because of the way the antennas are adjusted. And as people move into P25 and then P25 phase 2, they're going to see more and more of these different anomalies that have to be accounted for on a system by system basis. It's not, you just can't write a national code to cover it.
Right. And I think it's important to note here that, you know, as a contractor, if you've been told by the fire marshal that you need an ERC system in your building, or they believe that you're going to need an ERC system in your building, reach out to me. The first thing I'm going to do is look at the location of your new building. And I'm going to say, well, you know, we're planning on building out a smaller ARS site or a tower site near this location in the near future that should take care of this requirement. You don't need an in-building BDA. And, you know, most cellular companies, they don't use bidirectional amplifiers in their buildings. They try and stay away from those. They put in micro cells, smaller cells, to help accommodate in-building coverage. Now, it's not perfect. And I know moving forward in the future, you're going to see Verizon and the FirstNets out there also being required to provide in-building coverage for public safety. You know, as we see some migration toward public safety in the cellular systems, they use a lot of data. They're running video cameras. So you're going to see that requirement make its way into the IFC and then the NFPA documentation. And so most cellular companies are funded very well, and they can afford to put in a microcell, you know, every quarter mile or even, I don't know what exactly it is, but they provide in-building coverage in that way. And, you know, we are limited by finances. And so we have to pick and choose to the best of our ability to put in these smaller cells or a full build out close to the building. And if we can't do that, we look at BDAs, we look at passive antenna systems. There are other alternatives to this, and let us help you. I mean, that's what we're here for. Any other questions there, Carl, or anybody else?
Yes, we've got a couple more that have come in. What is your advice for those agencies who have no BDA registration or tracking controls in place in order to regain control over their systems?
So you have to start, yeah, I've been down that road here. So the best way to start this is to find out and work directly with your fire marshals in that area, whether it be state, local, city or county fire marshals. Talk with your fire departments, because what they're doing is they're going in and they're doing the in-building inspections, and they're saying, hey, we don't have radio coverage in this building. So work with them. Many times they already have a list on file of those BDAs or those buildings that need it. And, if you work directly with them, they can help you develop that list. So you have to develop a list to start, and then you have to provide your fire marshals and your fire departments a very clear document that outlines what the policy is as a frequency license holder to add a BDA to the system. And this includes having great third-party testers. You have to be able to depend on these people to go out and help represent you as a licensee to check these installations. As a contractor comes in, the contractor needs to be independently checked after the installation is in place by an independent third-party contractor. That's a really great way to make sure that everything is done legitimately, and the licensee needs to pick and choose those third-party contractors. Get that in place, then move forward with, you may have to create a department, as we have. We've had to dedicate some of our technicians to working on creating some kind of a system to track, particularly on Google Earth, where these BDAs are going in, where they've gone in the past, so that when somebody comes to me and they say, I want to build, I need an SRRCS system over here, can I put it in? And you find out, hey, you know what, there's another BDA across the street. Maybe we need to have them pull fiber in between the existing BDA and the new building. That's a great way to solve interference problems. So that may be an option, but you have to start somewhere. And I would say fall back on your fire marshals, those people that are going out and doing the building inspections. In our county now, they've been advised, as they do their annual inspections, to also make note of where is there a BDA in the building? Is there a BDA in the building? So there's a variety of things that they're tracking that haven't been done in the past.
I've got a comment. This is Lark from the FCC again. So as you look at this, think about the spirit of the rule, which clearly says that the licensee has to have reasonable control. So the way that I look at that and interpret that in the enforcement side is that the licensee, if they have interference, they can contact any of the booster operators and say, turn it off. And then they can see if their interference goes away to maintain officer or first responder safety. Then go in later and find out what happened. Did some equipment fail, etc. So that's the end game. It's their license. They have to control everything that they're authorizing. That's reasonable control. But yeah. Why? It's so that if they have an interference issue, that they can diagnose it and fix it as quickly as possible. And that might be as simple as contacting the building owner or whoever the building owner is working with, it's a contractor, to turn it off so they can see, is that the source of interference? Looking at what is the goal can help frame a lot of these answers.
Absolutely. I couldn't support you more on that one, Lark, because we've had to do that many times here in the county. We've had to, we've found interference on our system. We've had to track this down right to the source, and we've had to unplug those BDAs, and they've had to make corrective actions in order to turn them back on. So That's an important point. You know, we have to protect the public safety radio system at all costs. And as a licensee, since we're responsible for this, we do what's necessary to take care of our first responders. Any other questions?
Yeah, we've got one more question and 2 comments. So the question is, are you suggesting a building owner who cannot get a certificate of occupancy should wait 6 to 8 months for a licensee to engineer a new network inside of a 50,000 square foot building? Where do BDAs fit in the overall network infrastructure?
So, I mean, BDAs fit as an integral part of the overall network structure, the radio network structure. So when you add a BDA to a building, you're actually adding this to the overall macro system that we have. It has a direct effect on it. And if you have to wait 6 to 9 months for the licensee to respond, the licensee needs to do something different because, you know, as a licensee, I want to encourage businesses to come to our area. I want to make sure that we directly work with the fire marshals to assist the new building owner in getting the communications and the permits that they need to get. So as a license holder, I think it's important to be responsive to those questions. And yeah, I mean, if you can't get that, I think you need to express directly to the fire marshal, hey, the licensee is not responsive. And I assure you that the fire marshal will get a hold of us and we will rectify that. We'll move forward with it.
All right, excellent. And then just reading off 2 more comments for the group. Says, just as a note, we are beginning to require BDAs to be turned off that were originally prescribed due to local and state code requirements, as we have found that the location they are serving provides good or better native coverage than when the BDA was installed. This is why working with the license holder is very important and also cost effective to the building owners.
Great point. We're seeing a very similar thing here. You know, we recently in the last couple of years changed our modulation scheme. We're now, instead of analog, we're now digital, P25 digital. As part of that upgrade, we had CSI help us with the engineering, and that required directional antennas on the transmit side of things. So this changed a lot of in-building coverage in existing buildings, but we'll also change it in newer buildings. And we found that P25 systems tend to work very, very well in low signal level environments. And so the IFC 510 code that the firemen called out on originally was pushing neg 95 dBm signal or better. And that's been modified now in the 2018 version of that to not stress that as much. But what's really important is what they call the delivered audio quality. And the current IFC 510 2018 now states 3.0 DAC level or better. In our county, we've modified that to 3.4. And you know, we like a little bit better audio quality than that. Still 3.0 is not bad, but really we've been amazed at the native coverage that we have at very low signal levels. So you can no longer use just the RSSI signal level readings that we used to do. We use this in combination with DAC testing, and the 2 of them pretty much are very predictive and very accurate in the way things work.
And Nate, I'd like to just say one other quick thing here. One of the things that is going on right now is that we do have people in the industry, unfortunately, and we've been a really pretty good industry. I worked here for 40 years that are actually going out and doing testing for free. Oh, we'll test your building and tell you if you need a system. And we need to, as a group, when we do a test, for instance, when I do a test for Nate, I'll always bounce it off Nate. I mean, if there's any question about whether or not, you know, hey, Nate, what do we want to do about this? Because the use of signal boosters is probably, they're fine when they're used properly. And I'm just going to leave it at that. But when I start hearing licensees and frankly, even integrators telling me that 80% of the systems that are being put in aren't necessary, that's a very, very alarming number, especially when considering the ramifications of using signal boosters. Signal boosters need to be used very, very carefully because they are a full-blown repeater. That's all they are, an on-channel repeater. And when you look at a signal booster, especially if you're a P25 operator, say you're running a trunk system, a signal booster is really the only network element that you have no control over. You can shut down a radio, right? Somebody steals one of your portables and gets on, starts making noise. You can shut that down. But the signal boosters, as they stand right now, they don't have any PL access. They don't know if they're receiving noise. They don't know if they're receiving a mobile that's a half a mile down the street, and you've got 3 or 4 of them actually creating signals at one time. These things all have to be engineered, and it's been totally not happening over the last 5 years. It's just been, oh, new building. For instance, if I go into a shopping mall and I see a Costco in there and that Costco doesn't have coverage, what's the likelihood that the Home Depot that's going to be built right next door to it isn't going to have coverage also? This has to be looked at as an ecosystem that says, well, wait a minute, they're building a Costco, they're building a Home Depot, they're building this mall. Well, maybe we should be looking at putting a site out here and running fiber, or putting a site out here just to add the extra coverage we need, because, you know, you can't pack these signal boosters in here and keep doing this. They will eventually crash the radio system. It's physics. It's a math issue.
How are we doing on time, Carl? Or how are we
Well,
doing?
we're a little past, but great discussion. So I think that'll wrap it up. Nathan, Greg, thank you very much for your time to prepare and provide this presentation. Obviously, it's an important topic, and we appreciate you guys raising it up to the region. Hopefully, starting some conversations and starting some new insights into how to best approach this. Yeah, I can certainly say
we are asking NAPCO to help us too. I mean, we need to get the message out. And so we would really appreciate anybody's help within the organization here that would like to sit down and really start to develop some best practices around this subject matter.
Should they reach out to you, Greg, to do that, to start that?
Nate or myself, actually, right
Okay.
now. I mean, either one of us.
All right.
Yeah, no problem. But yeah, thank you to NAPCO for allowing us to make this presentation. I want to thank my boss, Paul Wilcox, the manager of department, for allowing me to have the time to do this. And I really appreciate that. He really believes this is an important topic, an important subject. And again, I couldn't do my job without the great technicians that I have in my staff. And thank you for listening to us today. Thank you to Lark Hadley with the FCC for helping us stress this point and helping to make licensees aware. Step up, participate, work with your fire marshals. We can get this under control, and we can make a better radio system out of this for our first responders. Thank you very much.